All right, we're recording. A little different. It's not going to be. I'll have to manually load it to YouTube for you. So hopefully I don't have any problems with that. But I want to go ahead and get this recorded and get started. And thank you guys for your patience with me. I apologize for the delay in order to record this. I mentioned briefly in my text my son and his family were in an automobile accident in Texas. We were in almost to our destination, Louisiana. We had to cancel that, turn around, and go help them. Fortunately, everybody is well. Everybody's fine, banged up a little, and including the other driver. She was pregnant, apparently pretty far along. I don't really know, but they had to do an emergency C-section, and but her and the baby, I understand it well. So that's good news. Both cars are totaled, and it was my son's. I think he was ticketed for one at fault. And so we'll just have to kind of deal with things as they come. But good news is nobody's seriously injured, and so we're glad for that. Thank you for your prayers. We want to begin our chapter here today, chapter at the basic and biblical Greek in Gnosis, chapter 34 of the indicative diddomi, and we really start to begin to look at me verbs. Now, me verbs are different. They're an older form of verbs from ancient Greek, classical Greek period, that were really dying out by the time the Koine came. But some of those verbs remained during the Koine period, during the time of Jesus' time on earth, and so we need to deal with those. And you've already seen the me verbs. You've seen me, I am, and you've already seen how in the various other forms or tenses it can kind of it acts differently, and so there's some things that would be a little bit more, let's say, funky and odd with the me verbs, but other things are really quite consistent. And so we're going to go through this real quick. I have put on the LMS this PowerPoint for you, as well as the quiz for this chapter. Our last week, next week, we'll cover chapters 35 and 36, which are, again, just expanding on the me verbs. We're going to focus on one me verb here, diddomi, and the next chapter expands to the other most common me verbs that are in the New Testament, and the last chapter is, I think, covering, what's chapter 36 cover? It's pretty short. I don't remember now. Okay, yeah, and some odds and ends dealing with those other me verbs. 35 is going to deal with, 35 is going to deal with non-indicative forms of the diddomi. So we'll move into, so this class is going to, or session is going to deal with the diddomi, focusing on the indicative mood. And next class, we'll look at diddomi again from the non-indicative moods, the subjunctive and those things. And then it'll also include chapter 36. We'll look at some of the other more popular me verbs, istemi, tithemi, and such. So let's go through this and we'll try to highlight a few things here. All verbs that we've learned so far belong to the omega, right? Remember, omega class, conjugation. And so we've conjugated those verbs, the first person singular, second person singular, third person singular, and then plural, down the line. And so you've gotten very comfortable with that, and that's good. But now we want to make it a little more uncomfortable. Greek does have another conjugation that uses an ending that does not have generally does not have connecting vowels. There actually are connecting vowels for the imperfect tense and I think the future tense, but we'll get to that a little later. But we're going to look at the me verbs are called the me conjugation instead of the omega conjugation. So let's walk through that very briefly. So here's some of the bad news. They're not like any of the verbs you've already learned. And you kind of already seen that with me. It's just weird. And me, the I am. The good news, though, that there are only very few of these verbs that appear in the New Testament. And many of the forms are really quite consistent and quite regular. So there's a lot of familiarity and consistency. You'll see tithemi, istemi, ame, diddomi quite often. and they're quite consistent. So you won't really have a lot of trouble recognizing most of them. The other good news with that is you already know about the tense, voice, and mood. Everything we've learned so far about verbs applies. And all we're doing is changing the form using a different conjugation, a different ending. Instead of having the omega conjugation ending, in the present tense, we're going to use the me conjugation endings. And so the me verbs are translated exactly the same as the omega verb. So ditto me, first person singular, means I give. So it's not something overly complex or new that you can't relate to because we're just really doing the same thing with a different conjugation pattern. So let's talk a little bit about what are me verbs. Well, they're an older conjugation of verbs that get their name from the present active indicative and ditto me, and there's the ending ditto me. Where our omega verbs ended with the omega, like luo versus ditto me. The me verbs have no connecting vowel. That's not 100% accurate. There are connecting vowels in the imperfect, but we'll get to that later. Because their stem ends with a vowel. Now, you remember when we did contract vowels. That is omega conjugations. That is a verb that has a contract vowel. It doesn't necessitate a stem vowel. And so, because it is a contract vowel, and so you would add the personal ending directly to the contract vowel, and that would cause oftentimes a blout, that is a lengthening or shortening or dropping of the vowel. Oftentimes the vowel would contract, or the vowels associated with contract. So, and we're going to get some of the same kind of things here. All right, so in ditto me, our root is the delta omicron, so da, and that's important to know. And really, these others we won't get to until next week. Tithe me and Iste me, but the same thing. The root is the for Tithe me, and Histe me, notice the rough breathing, is sta. We'll get to that next week, but this week we're going to focus on ditto me. And so we have our root with no connecting vowel. And in the present form, we'll come with the present tense, it's characterized by this reduplication. We've had reduplication in the perfect. It's the exact same thing, except it's in the present for the me verbs. And so you'll know a present tense me verb really by the reduplication very easily. The rough breathing there helps. And we saw it in the perfect tense stems. The only difference is the perfect uses the epsilon as the vowel, a connecting vowel for, I don't know if it's called a connecting vowel, for the reduplicated consonant and the root. Whereas in the me verbs, under the present tense, I'm going to say that again, present tense does the reduplication. There's our reduplication with the delta, and it uses the epsilon instead, iota instead of the epsilon. The reduplication has no perfect meaning. In other words, just because you see reduplication doesn't mean it's perfect. It's not. It's the present tense form. And it's always found in the me verbs of the present tense stems. So present tense will always be, if the me verb, be recognizable because it has the reduplication with the iota vowel and not the epsilon. Very much like the perfect. So there are 5 rules to really sort of, you can learn all 330 paradigms for this and memorize those, but that'd be like very, very difficult. I'm not going to do it, and I wouldn't expect you to, but you may want to. That's fine. Go get a book. I'll show you all 330 of them. I'm actually going to show you some in a minute. But if you learn these 5 rules, you kind of see a consistent pattern with them. So rule 1, right? The me verb reduplicate, as we just talked about, in their initial stem letter, just like the perfect does, but it's in the present and it's separated by the iota. All right, so here's our root do for ditto me. We add our reduplication There's our duplicated stem vowel with the delta, and we had our iota instead of the epsilon as the the vowel that separates it. There's our root, and then what happens is the root gets lengthened in the singular. You can find it stays a long vowel in the singular, but in the plural it's going to stay the short vowel. Did do, and so we get did do, and then we add our personal endings, ditto me. We're doing the same thing we've already done. We're just using a different conjugation, and because of the present, it's going to be reduplicated like it was the perfect, but it's going to be using the iota instead of that. And so ditto me is the present for I give, first person, singular, present, active, indicative. That becomes very recognizable because of the delta iota. But the key is to really understand and memorize the root of these me verbs. There's not a lot of them, but if you recognize the da, that will help you not just so much ditto me, but it will help you with the other tenses, and as well as the other moods later on. Okay, so it's just a reduplication with the iota that occurs in the present. You don't have the reduplication in the other tenses, only in the present. Okay, rule 2, the me verbs ordinarily do not use connecting vowels. There are connecting vowels on the imperfect, I think on the future, but they ordinarily do not use connecting vowels, and because their endings are then added directly to the stem. We've seen that before. It's nothing new. It's just now we're going to apply it to these me verbs. So we have our root da, and we reduplicate with the iota vowel separating and maintain the root. We get our lengthened omega to lengthened omicron to omega. We add our personal ending, and ditto me, I get. And so it's basically we adding the ending, personal ending directly to the stem ending, which is very much like similar to what we did in the contract vowels. So the key, though, is to memorize the root of the me verbs. That really will help you when you get ditto me. Won't be a problem for you. You'll see ditto me a million times. I did. That's not a million, obviously, a lot, and that won't be a problem. It's when you get to the other tenses and you see like a do so, right? A do. So you're like, what is that? Well, if you know that is your root for ditto me, you'll be able to figure out that's a future active indicative. So it won't be a problem for you once you sort of know that. So, and there's not a lot of them. So there's not a lot of ones that are used often. Okay, so rule 3. So rule 1, right? There's a reduplication like the perfect, except we're going to use the iota instead of the epsilon, and it's only done in the present. And rule 2 is that we basically typically don't use connecting vowels. We add our personal endings, the me, the first me is the first person singular form, and we'll add it to the directly to the stem ending. Rule 3 is the me verbs are different. They use different personal endings, but they're not really a lot unlike what you already know. A lot of them will be the same. Like here's our first person plural, ditto men, and we give, and ditto metha. There's the middle passive form. We are given, and so we have the same root. We had a reduplication of the present to the present. We made the lengthen here for our stem vowel that ends, ending stem vowel, and then we add our personal endings. Most of these personal endings you're going to know already. There's a few that you won't, but most of them are going to be very much the same. Rule 4, the stem vowel of a me verb can lengthen, it can shorten, and it can completely drop out. That's what a blout is, right? Lengthen, shorten, contract, or drop out. So, and for our root da, we've already seen this one. We had a reduplication. We had our stem vowel ending, and now it lengthens to dido. And then we add our personal ending, ditto men. We give first person plural, present active indicative. Same thing here, dida lengthens, and we have the metha First person plural, get this right. My side tie, method as yeah, method for the passive, middle passive. We are given. Yeah, so if I looked at that, I don't know. All right, so but it helps if you understand that the root is from da and not from do or dido. Uh, so here's some examples with the tenses, right? Diddomi is versus reduplication with the iota, right? You got reduplication with the iota, and that's going to tell you that's the present. I mean, it's in the present tense, so you automatically know that. Here you have the augment, right? You've seen the augment in the imperfect and in the aorist, so now you're seeing it again with the reduplication. And there's our root, the da, right? And then our ending here, reduplication with the iota plus the augment. It's got to be the imperfect. You say, well, how come how do I know it's not the aorist? Well, because our aorist also has the reduplication. It will have these, the augment and the reduplication. No, excuse me. It doesn't have the reduplication. Let me make sure I got that right. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Eris. One, or two, or three. It goes to page 436. I think that's what I want. We'll go there later. I don't want to mislead here. In page 436, I think I'm giving you the answer. I think. More active note, perfect, future, okay, Arist is on page 438. It's passive adjective, but that's not the new verb. Second Arist will be the new verb in this. Yeah, athematic is in there. Yeah, that's what I want. That's the Arist in the future. So we want the athematic and no, it does not use the reduplication. Oh, well, stupid, because I already said the answer. It's only in the present tense, dummy. Man, it's only in the present tense. Why does the imperfect have the, I don't know why I didn't think of this. Why does the imperfect have the reduplication if we said it's only in the present tense? Well, because if you remember, the imperfect uses the present tense stem. And so it's going to follow what are the present tense. So the imperfect and the present tense are going to look the same, except we add a reduplication. The aorist is going to use the aorist tense stem. It will have the reduplication. There's our da with the lengthened omega to the omicron, lengthened omicron to the omega. So you see the augment with the tense formative. The kappa alpha is the tense formative for the me verbs for aorist, right? Kappa alpha. You've seen kappa alpha before, and so it has to be the aorist form. Here's our reduplication. Dido ka reduplicated with the tense form of the kappa alpha. It must be the perfect. Yeah, notice it's a epsilon, not the iota, so it's not the present tense. Dido, there's our do, our omega, omicron linked into the omega, reduplicated with the tense form of the kappa alpha, so it's imperfect. And then we have here's our delta omicron lengthened to the omega, and there's our future, and the personal ending, first person singular, sigma before the ending must be the future. So it should not be overly complex if you kind of remember how the tenses are formed, right? Whether it's a reduplication, whether or not it's using the present tense stem or the aorist tense stem, whether or not it's using a tense formative like the kappa alpha for the perfect, as well as the kappa alpha in this case for the new verb on the aorist, or the sigma for the future. So anyway, that's example of those rules and to help you recognize those. So let's look at a few paradigms. And so if we look at the present active, if it's present, it's going to have the reduplication with the iota, the separating vowel. So we have a reduplication, our lengthened connecting vowel for the omicron, And so we get diddomi. There's our first person singular. Second person uses the same sigmas we before. I think it was epsilon, iota, sigma. And so didos. Didosing. Also, I think we've seen that in the third person before. And didomen, didoete, didosan. Notice that the singular is going to use these lengthened stem vowel, the omicron, lengthened to the omega, but it doesn't lengthen in the plural. So you may ask why. Well, there are rules for it. I don't really know them, nor do I care to learn them. They can get, I don't say complex. There's a lot to how the lengthening, the shortening, the dropping, the contraction. There's a lot of different specific rules for that. And truthfully, for me, it's just not important enough to really spend time with. You may want to, and I'm pretty sure you could find some material that will bring that out. Our book even says it's not worth the time, and I have to agree. Notice the singular form has the long vowels, the omega, and the short vowels for the plural form. In the aorist stem drops the old reduplication, so there's no more reduplication. And the me verbs that the present tense stem uses, it uses the kappa, not the sigma, for the aorist tense formative. So we get kappa alpha. And so the verb, histe me, which we'll do next week, does not use the kappa alpha in the aorist, and it gets from a different form. We'll get to that next week. So I'm using a combination of different charts from different grammars. Some of the grammar charts that I find for the beginning New Greek Testament grammar is really explains things better than I think some of the ones from the charts that I found with the basic biblical Greek. So I mix them up. But sometimes that class is a little bit of question. What we want to know here is that our aorist for the diddomi is it uses the augment. It still has the delta omicron lengthens to the omega and uses the kappa alpha instead of sigma alpha. We find the same thing. So if we look at the six principal parts of the stems, right? Our present stem, our future stem, aorist, not stem, tenses, perfect tense, perfect middle passive, and our aorist passive, right? That's the order, by the way, that you find in the book when in the master verb chart, right? Although they have the imperfect in here. Basically, the Greek has an imperfect. So diddomi, that is a present tense. I can tell because I have the reduplication. There's our root with the lengthen, and there's our personal ending, me, first person singular. Here's our future. There's our root, lengthen omicron to omega. There's our future and our personal ending for first person future doso. Doka, there's our augment, just like we would find in the present. The difference for the, or excuse me, an imperfect. The difference for the imperfect is it's going to follow the present tense stem, so it will have the reduplication for the delta iota. And so, but here with the aorist, it does not have the present tense stem, so it does not follow the reduplication. It has our reduplication, augment, our root, delta omega, omicron, linked to omega, and our tense formative, the kappa alpha. The perfect does have the reduplication, but it's the same reduplication as on the perfect so far, the delta epsilon, and not the delta iota. So, yeah, there's our root with the lengthened omicron to the omega, and our tense formative with the kappa alpha. And then in the perfect middle passive, we have the reduplication. It's still perfect. It's not with the iota. It's with the epsilon, so that's a perfect. And there's our root, the delta omicron, and our middle passive ending. My side tie, that. And then our aorist passive endings, right? So aorist again has the augment with our root, the delta omicron does not lengthen. There's our theta, eta, tells us the passive, and the ending here, so edothane. And so once you sort of start to see the principal part or the makeup of the principal parts, it becomes really quite easy. But it is a different conjugation and me verb. So we'll look a little more at that. All right. So in our present tense stem, ditto me. We've gone over that multiple times. Second person singular, didos. This is our, that has to be present. That's a present. That has to be in the present tense, present tense, present tense. Okay. There's our root, our root, our root, our root, our root. And then we get our personal ending. So we get the me ending, the sigma ending, the sin, the min, the eta, and the sin here. Now you've seen these before. I think on page, it does a good job, I think on page 34.8 on page 392. There he talks about how, I don't like the way he words it, the me verbs employ three different personal endings in present, active, indicative. The me, the see, and the I see. Well, they're not, they're three different, they're three new. All the rest are the same. So the first person singular is the me. The second person singular is the sigma. Your third person singular is going to be the C, and the first person plural is the min, and the second person plural is the ta, and the third person plural is different, it's the asi. And he compares it to the thematic. Now, let me just, I meant to mention earlier, so a thematic vowel is what, conjugation, are those verbs that generally necessitate a connecting vowel. It doesn't, in order to add the personal ending to the root, you need a connecting vowel. That's a thematic verb conjugation. The me verbs do not necessitate, in all cases, in most cases, a connecting vowel because they end in a vowel. The root does, it ends in a vowel. And so it doesn't necessitate one. So that would be an athematic. In other words, there's no connecting vowel. And so he kind of goes over that in the book. If you look on top of page 393 in that top paragraph, he kind of continues explaining the difference in Rule 3 between these different personal endings for me verbs and the present. It says me verbs use the same endings as the thematic conjugation in three places. So the second person singular, the first person plural, and the second person plural are the same as what we've already known. However, the other three place endings, that it would be the first person singular, the third person singular and the third person plural are different. And so he tried to bring that out, and you can see that breakdown there. And then he does the same thing with the middle passive, the my sci tie, meta and tie. Notice that they are the same. So when you get to the passive, they have the exact same personal endings as you already know. My sci tie, meta and tie. The only real difference is oftentimes the second person singular, there's a lot of contraction when it comes to the connecting vowel with that personal ending because of the sigma there. But because there's no connecting vowel, you don't have the contraction on the me verb. So you have didosai, and that's on the page 393. So anyway, I want to point out that a little bit here. Hopefully that can be followed. In the imperfect, what he talked about, we have our augment consistently. And because the imperfect is using the present tense stem, we're going to have the reduplication. And then we're going to include or build from our root, our delta omega, delta omicron, and then add our personal endings. And you know, the personal endings here are the exact same thing that you've already learned for a secondary personal endings. If you look at the secondary personal endings, these follow that same pattern. So the only place you really have significant changes in the personal endings are going to be in the present tense stem. Otherwise, we're using the same personal endings. And we'll know the present tense stem because, or the imperfect, because we're using the reduplication with the iota. In the future, there's our root with the delta omicron. Here's our root. Here's our root. Here's our root. Here's our root. All the same. So very simple. And then we have our future with the personal ending. Future with the ace personal ending, second person single. Future with the A personal ending, third person single. We already know that one. Here's the future with the connecting vowel and our third person plural. Here's our future with the connecting vowel and our third person, second person. This is the first person plural. I don't know what I said. Here's our connecting vowel with the second person plural. Here's our future with the connecting vowel in our third person plural. So aorist, pretty straightforward. We have our da, our root throughout the place. No problem. Our root, and then we have our augment, right? Just like we have in the imperfect, just like we saw before. The only difference is we do not have the reduplication. It's not following the present tense stem. It's using the aorist tense stem. So and we get our lengthen in the omicron to the omega throughout. And then we use our present tense stem to kappa alpha, and kappa epsilon there, kappa alpha, and our personal endings. No ending, the sigma, the noon, the men, the eta, and the on. Follows the same kind of pattern. So there's a lot of consistency with this. You just got to kind of recognize that in the present tense, you can see, in the imperfect, you'll see this reduplication. In present tense, you'll find where the imperfect follows the same pattern we saw for the secondary endings. The present will use, at least here, here, and here, different personal endings. And of course, the perfect should be no problem. There's our root. There's our root. There's our root. There's our root. On down the line. Okay, and we use our reduplication, except it's with the epsilon and not the iota. So that's how you know it's not the present. And we have our same kappa alpha we've seen, kappa epsilon there, kappa alpha, kappa alpha, kappa alpha for the tense formative. That's not new. And our personal endings. Same personal endings we've already seen. This is the men, sorry about that. And eta and on. So as you kind of walk through, you sort of see what's happening. And it should kind of at least make sense. Now, obviously, we're breaking it into pieces, and so it's kind of recognizable, I hope. But obviously, when you're reading the text, it may not be as straightforward. But if you just think through, okay, if I go work from the outside in, like we talked about, okay, if I work, well, what's the personal ending? Is there an augment? Is there a reduplication? Oh, wait a minute, reduplication of delta iota. That might be a present tense stem me verb, especially if you're seeing the me endings here. And you just kind of work your way in, you find the root, you know the root, you're really in a much better shape. All right, so if you go to page 436, I put this here only just for reference. I want you to be looking and using those indexes or those matrices or paradigms in the back of the book. Page 436, it's going to talk about the present indicative. And the first thing it's talking about is what is a thematic uncontracted? In other words, we have contracted vowels and uncontracted vowels, right? So thematic uncontracted verb versus thematic, right? Our thematic contracted, where our contract vowels were the alpha, the epsilon, and the omicron. And so it kind of goes through, we've already done all this, it goes through what happens. Luo, there is no contract vowel, Luace, Lue, Luamen, Lueta, Luisa, and down the line. Then you get to Genomai. Genomai, of course, I beget, I became, with the contract vowel, and you see some ablaut, some vowels contracting, and you get Geno, Genos, Gena, Genamen, Genate, on down the line. It's the same as the middle passive index with the epsilon and with the omicron. So it's a good reference. I really want to point it out because you find the same kind of things happening with the me verbs that you find with the thematic contracted vowels. The only difference is when you find also on page 436 the athematic. Athematic means there is no connecting vowel. And so this one, Ishtemi, its root is sta. This one, Tithemi, its root is tha. This one, Diddomi, its root is da. This is the one we're focusing on today. And so here we get the root, Diddomi, Diddos, Diddosi, Diddosumet, Diddomen, Diddoete, Diddosat, Diddoasi, Diddomai, Diddosai, Diddotai, Diddometa, Diddoesta, Diddoonta. Should be pretty consistent and familiar in most cases. So what I want to try to do is highlight what you're familiar with, so you don't like, oh wow, this is all new. It's not really all new. There's a lot that is new because you're dealing with the me verb. You've already seen the me verbs and the verb a me, and you've seen a lot of weird things. And granted, they're weird things, but you begin to see certain patterns that occur. In the present tense, you're going to have the reduplication with the iota, versus in the perfect tense, you have reduplication with the epsilon. And you'll find if you can know the root, it makes it really easy to see the changes that occur. And I think that's kind of all I want to cover. Yeah. So it's short chapter. I thought about combining this with the next, but I thought, no, let's just absorb this much. In the next chapter, we'll look at the other non-indicative moves for diddomi and kind of see what happens there. I'd asked for questions, so it's recording, so I don't think that'll do any good. So I hope that makes sense, and I'll get this out today and let you know as soon as it's posted. But I had to record it. I think it's recorded to my computer. I'm not 100% positive where it's recording to, but I'll find it, Lord willing, and then I'll have to upload it to the YouTube because I'm recording at the same time another class is ongoing, and it wouldn't let me record to YouTube at the same time as they're recording to YouTube. So I had to record separately. I can't think of anything else, guys. I hope that makes sense. I do have in the LMS the quiz and the PowerPoint here. Also, we'll be working on to get completed, hopefully this week, the final. And it will not cover chapters 34, 35, and 36. Only chapters, I believe it's 21 through chapter 33. All right, my AirPods are dying. I got to get new earbuds, and we'll talk to you later. Thank you. Stop recording.